Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. David Gouthro, Discover Fresh Perspectives, back with some fresh perspectives from my guest, Julie Trell, all the way from Australia. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you for having me, David. It's good to be here on tomorrow.
And yes, I'm just going to have to think about, it's like 8:30 or 9 o'clock or something there.
9:30.
So, Julie, one of the reasons that I, was looking forward to having you on my podcast, we met at a conference a couple of years ago, the Applied Improvisation Network. I'm a professional speaker. I just don't do it well. The Applied Improvisation Network conference here in Granville Island. And I just, was immediately attracted to your energy and your spirit and stuff like that. And I thought, wow, what a cool person. And I think that's the last time I saw you. But I thought, wow, she is probably going to be a great guest. So I'm so glad you agreed to do this.
Well, thank you for having me. I think it was my magic wand and silver pants, the silent disco night. I had a great time.
I am attracted to things like that, I must say. Anything sparkly, right? So, Julie, you've had a rather eclectic career. And, some people, they decide right out of high school, university, what they want to do with the rest of their life, and they have it totally planned out. And others, it's just sort of, serendipitous. And I'd be really interested in hearing, well, first of all, what you're doing now and where you're doing it and how you got there. Like, what's the path by which Julie Trell has come to be Julie Trell doing what Julie Trell does?
It's a very nonlinear career path. I like how you're calling it eclectic. It was nonlinear and serendipitous, one of my favorite words, and I will use that explaining how I got some of my roles. What I'm doing now is listening to the universe. But there are things that got me here, and I've been listening to the universe between several times.
So
You have a question?
Well, just listening to the universe. So now some people listening might kind of go, oh, I get that. That's great. And other people go, is she an astronomer? So when you say listening to the universe, maybe just give a little more detail on what that means to you.
Well, let me flash back first about when everyone's younger, what did you want to be when you were growing up? Mm-hmm. I sort of said, I wanted to be a veterinarian until my mom reminded me that, well, animals die. Then that was off the table. And then I kind of jokingly, kind of seriously wanted to be an ice cream truck driver. And I reflect back on that because that's fun and kids and playful and the ringing of the bell. Mm-hmm. So what was the question again? My old brain and tomorrow. Well, I wanted to make a point there.
Well, I guess more it's just about, simplify and just say, what's the path that you've been on from the time you got on a path?
So listening to the universe is watching what in the present, what would drop in front of me. So one of my first jobs, I was graduated college, cried for a week, didn't know what I was going to do. And then I saw this program. Oh, I was doing some teaching at a synagogue on a weekend. I was an assistant. And one day the teacher she wasn't able to teach. She's like, I would love for you to take over. These were 7 or 8-year-olds. And I had been a camp counselor, but I was giving curriculum and teaching and I prepped for it. And I remember driving home from that one day and being like, the sky opened up and the clouds and the angels sang or whatever ethereal being it was and said, you should be a teacher. So it was that moment. I felt it. I did it. It wasn't like something I read about. And then I went and I got into a program. It was the second year of a program. So I love being at the inaugural part of programs.
Okay.
And this was, I think, the second cohort of a master's program that was done in a year. Got it done in a year. And so it was kind of elite there. It was a range of adults. How old was I? 23, maybe? Not even. So I was one of the younger people in a cohort of 25. And I'll never forget the interview. There were 2 professors and myself, and they said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now, mind you, I'm 23, 22. And I had this brilliant answer. And I said, I would love to be the creative liaison between content and education, content and entertainment of Sesame Street.
Oh,
i.e.
wow.
A producer. That's a producer. And I'll also remember, so this is back in the late 1900s, 93, 92, and we had to write an essay. Like they gave us a timed essay written in one of those blue books where they asked you a question. That was part of the application process. So I got into teaching. because of that, listening to the universe. And I was a camp counselor that next summer. I graduated camp counselor, and then I became a teacher in an inner city school, which was very challenging.
Sorry, of which city and state, Julie?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
So, as you can hear, I'm American. We forgot to tell everyone. I am American living in Sydney, Australia, which is tomorrow to you. Um, and so I was in this school. It was a very challenging school, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I started to fall in love with working with technology. And I was in an inaugural program at Kennesaw State University called InTech, where they were teaching teachers how to integrate technology in the classroom, changing the format of the kids were like, oh, you finished your work, go play on the computer. And at this time, the computers were
Mhm.
Apple IIes,
Right.
the old ones,
Yeah.
and really integrating and using technology as a tool, not because what would happen is the kids who were smarter that finished their work first would always be the ones to play on the computers. That's not
Mhm.
fair.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I went through this program and I fell in love with how to integrate technology logically, creatively, strategically. And the next thing you know, I'm talking my way into a role as a technology specialist in a middle school.
Hmm.
And this interview, I remember myself saying, yo, I was warned that the person whose role I was taking, they're like, you have big shoes to fill. Everybody loves this woman. She's, everyone trusts her. And so I was like, oh, it was a new principal. So a new principal, a new technology specialist. And I remember myself saying, and I remember exactly what I was wearing and sitting and everything. And I said, well, I like to think that I can learn things quickly. I just remember that being, and I did, and I loved every moment of it because I was learning the technology. This required fixing computers and the network and everything, and here's how I used to fix computers. These were Power Mac 5400s now, upgrading from the Apple IIes to Power, and I know you know this because you worked at Apple,
I
the
did,
Power
yes.
Mac
Bringing back lots of
5400s.
good memories.
Yeah, Apple Talk and Ethernet. And this is how I used to fix the sad face or question mark disk. I would pull out the motherboard, smack the hard drive, put it back in, and it would work probably 90% of the time. I was also the one that broke the network half the time. I was running CC mail on an LC2 server, but what I loved was people would be like, I'd walk into work, Miss Trell, the internet's down. And I'm like, oh, well, we need to talk to Al Gore about that because remember, Al Gore invented the internet. And then I would go and I would fix it. But again, half the time the internet was down, it was my fault. And, that was a great learning journey for me, running the network, working with teachers how to integrate the technology, trusting the kids to teach the adults and
Mm.
letting adults give up some of that control. So again, it was very serendipitous. And if you have any questions, I can stop here because I have more serendipity how I got jobs.
Okay, keep serendipity. I mean the learning journey. It's really a great phrase, actually, because I think many people look at learning as discrete, quanta or something like that. We learn, then we work, then we learn, then we work. But it sounds like for you, it's kind of like an ongoing thing. And I think that particularly I like the notion of learning from the kids because so many times, we end up being the sage on the stage that no one wants to listen to. They'd rather learn themselves. They'd learn more from talking to each other than listening to me. And that was kind of early days for that kind of thinking back then. So I can imagine there's a lot of resistance.
Well, I love that you use the sage on the stage because I always wanted to be the guide on the side to
Hmm.
add to the frame. And I would have in my computer labs, ask three, then me, because the kids knew. And also to that, I had the acronym RATS, read all the screen. Rats, read all the screen because the kids, the answers were on there. Pull down menus, figure it out. So letting the kids learn and teach themselves, being the critical thinking skills, which is another story about I'm worried about how the world is today and we're losing our critical thinking skills. But yeah, so I wanted to be this I didn't want to be the sage on the stage. I wanted to be the guide on the side, and I think that's the producer role. And then also to your point about learning, I could literally feel the synapses being formed. When I had a broken computer, that night I would sleep and dream about how to fix it. What are the things I hadn't done? So I could feel that. And truth be told, I'm missing that now at, middle age, thinking I'm like, I'm missing this. I need to create more synapses. And So that was where I was. There was another. Oh, I became an Apple Distinguished Educator. So again, back to the Apple
Was that
stories.
before or after they knew that you were taking out the hard drive and banging it to get it fixed? Was that one of the things that they taught you, or one of the things that?
I would share that. I shared that with the community. I'm like, I'm struggling with this computer. This is what I've already done. Can you help me with next steps? How do I get the at ease and the network to work? Here's what I've done. And they would laugh. And it's a great, again, I was in the second cohort of the ADE program. So I loved being that early adopter. The following, the like, do you know Derek Sivers' TEDx talk? We talked
Yep,
about this,
yep,
the first
yep,
follower. It's a
yep.
form of leadership.
Mm.
It's definitely a form of leadership. So not the first, but I was there and helping design and give feedback on programs.
And then you became an Apple Extinguished Educator, was it?
Extinguished, yeah, extinguished educator with my yeah, don't tell anyone. Yeah. Apple Distinguished Educator. And with that, I then again more serendipity. I happened to be on a trip to Israel and I met Mark Benioff, who is the CEO of Salesforce. And he wasn't yet the CEO, or he was building Salesforce. So this was back in the late 1900s. And he was building something which was not yet the term SaaS or
Right.
cloud wasn't a thing yet. This is when we were all getting AOL on CDs. And he tells me that he wanted to start this company that was going to sell software over the web. You know, again, I'm a teacher. I'm like, all right, that's kind of cool. But then he said, and I also want to bridge the digital divide. I want to make sure the have-nots are getting access to what the haves have. And that was like, okay, now you're speaking my language because I was in inner city Atlanta. And I said, Mark, that's great. If you're going to, in all my 28-year-old wisdom, I said, Mark, that's great. If you're going to deal with kids and technology, however, you need to hire a teacher. Don't just be a company that gives away money. Little did I know that was my interview. And he said, well, why don't you come from Atlanta to San Francisco and help me start the Salesforce Foundation?
Wow.
Yeah. So
And now, what was the foundation as distinct from the Salesforce, the software company?
yeah, so Salesforce is a cloud technology. It was the customer relationship management, CRM, it was in the 2000s. And the foundation, he wanted to use, he saw that a company should start giving back from the start.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
so we were designing, we were a team of 4 at this point when I joined, 3 or 4. And how do we get the community engaged and how do we get schools and after school programs? So this is where we were really focusing on was after school programs. And I was writing curriculum and getting employees to help work with kids. So it was employee engagement, it was technology and figuring it all out. Again, it was early stages. We were throwing spaghetti to see what stuck.
Mm.
At the beginning, we were actually working with kids with after school programs and wanting kids to tell their stories. So we were pre-YouTube. We actually built something YouTube-esque before YouTube was there. And we were bringing kids from all over the world. I produced an international film festival of kids telling stories of their
Mm.
life. And, we brought them from all over, from Israel and Japan and Ireland and all over to come to this festival, and that's
Wow.
what I was starting with. But it didn't make sense. The CRM company doing youth media wasn't a great match. And then what we found was a lot of these employees who I also managed. Managed the volunteer program. My title was VP of all things fun, meaningful, and rewarding.
I can imagine the size of your business card.
Well, I made the business card, so I was able to make it fit. I worked with the employees also, and a lot of the employees were saying, this Salesforce is very cool. I'm working at a nonprofit, they could use it.
Mm.
And so organically, the Salesforce Foundation saw the power of this tool for nonprofits and higher eds, and how can we get this in the hands of other organizations. My role was really community focused with the grants, with employee engagement. I've had a hat of wearing product manager. So I worked with the developers internally to build volunteer force. How can we use our own tool, drink our own champagne to manage volunteer program? Again, more serendipity, stepping into listening to the universe. Oh, this is needed. Let me figure this out. And it was great to work in a company and have a visionary like Mark Benioff to let things happen and people try these things.
So it sounds kind of like you have an opportunity magnet that unconsciously draws you to other things, brings them together. Like it's
I
right in a
like
way.
that. Yeah, I like that opportunity magnet and being open and practicing of the yes and the yes because and yes, what I like about that um, and being around the right people. So I was at Salesforce for 12 years,
Oh
which
wow.
is a long
Okay.
time in one place.
Mhm.
And I'm a people person and I really love the relationship building, the R in CRM, the relationship building and what was possible. And so I left there and then I was the executive director of the Workday Foundation, so another corporate entity, and using what I learned and what I built at Salesforce to this organization and recognizing organizations have different ethos and different ways of thinking when you have the senior leadership. So I built what where there was a match for me there, but it didn't end up to be a long-term match, which was fine. Very proud of what I left laid down there is
Mhm.
still has grown. Someone else has taken it to a eh, um, great lengths and great efforts to the point where they even made a documentary of their engagement there. Now that was over
Uh-huh.
10 years ago, but
Uh-huh.
it was a seed that I felt I planted. So I want to take a little credit there.
Okay, just a sec.
Um,
Let's just pause. Okay, just wanted that to sink in, so the people that are listening give you a little bit of credit for that.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
And I'm learning to flex that muscle and backing myself and saying, I've done this. Um, and then from there, it's how I ended up in Australia. I say my story is serendipity, flip-flops, and a love letter to Mary Poppins is
Oh,
how
well,
I ended
that's
up in Australia.
okay. Got to hear about that.
So, I was on Facebook one day, as you do, and my friend in London posted that her friend in Sydney was looking for someone to fill her flip-flops. Now, I just need to note that flip-flops are called thongs in
Right.
Australia if you are not Australian.
Okay.
If you are Australian. If you're not Australian, they're flip-flops.
And of
And this
course,
woman was
thongs in other places is something quite different as well. So very important to understand
correct.
the cultural context there.
Correct. So this job description said looking for someone to fill my flip-flops. The woman is English, so flip-flops for her.
Yep.
If she said looking for someone to fill my thongs,
Yeah.
very different. So this job description was literally said looking for someone to fill my flip-flops because someone encouraged this woman to say, write a love letter to your replacement. Now, this role replacing she was running a corporate accelerator, a corporate startup accelerator where it works with startups who needed help and funding and connection and network. That's what this accelerator was underneath a large organization, Telstra, which is the AT&T of Australia. So it's a
Okay.
corporate, very large entity. So she had this beautiful job description. It was so heartfelt. It says, looking for someone that has the gravitas to work with corporate, someone that understands the startup ecosystem. I grew up at Salesforce. It was a
Mhm.
startup or a scale up when I got there. Um, and someone that is more concerned about the success of others than their own personal gains. It was
Wow.
this beautiful, yeah, it was
Yeah.
beautiful. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to have this conversation with Annie, who is the woman whose flip flops needed to be filled. And it was just great. I really wasn't looking to move. I wasn't like, "Oh my god, this is a dream job," until I started talking to her. I'm like, "This is great." She was lovely. She saw more she had more confidence in me than I did in myself.
Mhm.
You have a question?
No, I'm just kind of
Okay.
pondering that. So that's really,
Okay.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I think it's always so powerful to try to understand how other people see us. Like I actually find the same thing that I find like senior executives at organizations that are making way more than I could even imagine making in a lifetime. And they're listening to me and asking like for advice and my opinion. I kind of go, What am I not seeing?" Right? So it's nice that she saw that in you.
Yeah, and at this age and stage in my life, I have to start listening to those voices. I love that. I have that same question, like, "What does she sing?" "Oh, she's singing something. Let me listen to her. I gotta start
Mhm.
listening to that." So, she had a great conversation with her, and she got me very excited. I went to sleep that night. I literally dreamt and imagined myself in Australia. This was
Mm.
8.5 years ago, and so I saw myself there and what life would be like, and then I woke up and I'm like, Julie, who do you think you are? You don't have the skills to do this, 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 and this. And that voice, her name is Beatrice,
Mhm.
my imposter voice, was yelling at me. But then I hadn't named my cheerleader yet. Her name is Rara. She said, Rara says, remember that Harvard Business Review article you read? How men will apply for jobs even if they have 10 of the 2 of the 10 requirements?
Mhm.
Stop it. Go for it. So I continued to have conversations and interviews, and she flew me down to Australia in January. It's summer. She turned on the weather. She turned on an amazing week of a visit. And here I am standing on a stand-up paddleboard with the harbor bridge in the background, crystal blue water, white sandy beach, and I'm doing yoga poses on the stand-up board because we did this beautiful walk, a walk from the CBD, the Central Business District, down to Rose Bay. And I'm like, Julie, if you don't take this, you are going to regret it. So my 2020 vision said something. It was the same voice that told me, if you don't move to San Francisco, you're going to regret it. So I said yes, and I moved here. Now I'm expanding. I want to go back to the Mary Poppins serendipity and love letters. We mentioned the love letter. No, I mentioned the serendipity. I mentioned the flip flops. The love letter to Mary Poppins is, so I get here. It's been 2 or 3 weeks, and then I read the Telstra's job description for the role, and the Telstra's, yeah,
Little
the
different.
Telstra's, yeah, the Telstra's job description was very corporate, was very much like what Mr. Banks was writing for the nanny that he wanted versus what Jane and Mary wrote for their Jane and Michael wrote
Jane and
for their
Michael Banks. Yeah.
Banks. Yeah, exactly. So what they wrote for their nanny was Mary Poppins. So that's where a serendipity, flip flops, and a love letter to Mary
Mm.
Poppins is what brought me here. I and it was good that I didn't have the curse of knowledge yet of the
Mhm.
ecosystem, because I just showed up and I decided to not necessarily reinvent myself, but if I reflect back on things, play has always been a theme in my life. So teaching, arts and crafts counselor, wanting to be an ice cream truck driver. Um, and I wanted to not play for play's sake, but how can I bring this into this corporate place? Which I did. Again, not having the curse of knowledge. I just played I tried things without asking for permission, and I have some examples of those. Um, for example, there was an executive learning the professional development with all the senior executives. It was a week long down in Melbourne at a vineyard, and one of the activities was to read a case study and then report back to the rest of the group what the case study was. Simple enough. And I said to my group, I'm like, let's do a human PowerPoint. For those of you improvisers listening out there, that's the slideshow game where we would read the case study, and our presentation back to everyone was 4 of the people in this group, 4 of the 5 of us would create a slide, would put ourselves in a frozen statue of something, and then the 5th person would explain to the audience what this human slide looked like, and explain, here we have a graph of so and so, and it looks like this. And then he would go click, and then we would move our bodies in another statue, and then he would explain this slide. So it was a lot of fun and playful and also purposeful and a different way of learning and sharing. So when anyone was in my group, whenever we had to do an activity, we would play, but in such a way that it was fun, and everyone, got into it. At the end of the week, we had to do these videos or share about what we learned. And one of the groups did something with like a conga line, with the general counsel doing this conga line thing. And someone comes up to me, like, oh, that conga line, that was so you did that. I said, I had nothing to do with it. So people took the invitation to play.
There's a bunch of different things that are occurring to me, and they're kind of all over the place. One of my previous guests, a fellow by the name of Alan James Moore, And he wrote a book called Party Crashing or Party Crasher. And by that, he meant going places where he wasn't invited or that wasn't expected. Sort of similar to what you did. So, like, he was a soccer player. He went over to Scotland and applied for a team. No one invited him over there, just did it, and talked about the value of not waiting to get invited into things. So that's one thing that occurs to me. Another occurs to me, and I'm thinking about this for myself, but as well as some of the other listeners. If you can think of a time when you didn't pay attention to that voice, like you paid attention to the voices, or if you've ever just shut them off and have just stopped listening for those voices, and what opportunities are missed, and maybe being stable and just being on cruise control for the rest of your life is fine. But if growing is important, growing in so many different ways, then maybe we need to start paying more attention to those voices, or listening for them, or creating them and going for it. So that's a number of different things that you tweaked. And the whole thing about playful, it also occurred to me about, maybe it's just a semantic difference, but the difference between being childlike and childish. I think people don't want to be childish. It's a waste of time, but they can see the value of being childlike. There's a video I saw many years ago called The Way We Were, and showed a bunch of kids just playing, but all the characteristics that they were doing were so important to be in an organization and for being creative and innovative and things like that. But again, we shut off those opportunities because of the biases of the judgments that we have in front of that. And play is one of those things that I find, if you tell people they're going to play, they roll their eyes. If you do stuff that's playful, they feel it and touch it and want more, just like the person that decided, I like this Congo line for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Being invited. It's similar to in corollary, in addition to that, is hashtag it never hurts to ask. And I love your analogy. Like, kids won't ask, they'll just do things a lot of the time, and not childish, childlike. So important, because you get into flow there. We don't censor ourselves. And to your point about the voices, those voices are usually not going to go away. They're there to protect us for not getting into trouble, or it's that, the prefrontal cortex. So I know the voices are there. I am grateful for them because I know that they're trying to protect me. And I say, thank you for your help, being kind, putting them over here, and not listening to them for a while. As a matter of fact, one time I had to be on the news on TV, and my voice was making noise. And I said to my friend, actually the woman who hired me, I said, Annie, I can't afford to go on and take Beatrice with me. I need you to take her. And instead of being like, oh, no, you'll be fine, it's that pat kind of compliment, she's like, let me take Beatrice. I got her. We're going to go to the beach. We're going to drink gin, and I'm going to take care of her. And just the way she played with me with that offer really helped out. And literally, I remember myself looking straight into the camera, and I'm like, haha, Beatrice, hope you're having fun, because I'm here without you and I'm doing all right.
There's so many things running through my mind. So this is a little bit of a divergence, but I think I'm thinking back to the comment I made about kids, childish, childlike, but also too, I know some of the things that are talked about in business a lot are the sort of the dangers and downside of comparisonitis or things like that. And I was just thinking about this, like when do kids stop? When do kids start comparing themselves? And I think that's it's hard to be in play when you're comparing, right?
Totally.
Because you can't totally be there. So how have you seen that play out as adults, like the curse of comparisonitis?
Yeah, I call that comparasaurus.
Comparasaurus.
It's an entity, like the same, like Comparasaurus and Beatrice are like best buddies, and gotta send them away. And I would love to hear how other people manage that. To you brought up a story about why are they talking to me? Because that person has so much other thing. It gets really hard when you're not out enough and engaging and connecting. Like, that's what I'm realizing. And I am not currently out engaging and connecting. So my comparasaurus is making a lot of noise. I have to stop and pause and be even more deliberate about the times when I have done X, Y, and Z, or start listening to the people who say, oh my God, you've got such a great career path. And I love what you said about this. You're on this podcast. truth be told, I still have the imposter voices and the comparosaurus. And why did David ask me to be on here? I have nothing to share. And I want to thank you for the invitation and putting myself a little bit outside the comfort zone to figure out what I can exactly share. So please remind me what the question was. How do we stop the voice?
Well, that was a question I was thinking. I didn't actually voice that,
Oh,
but I think that is a
the
good question. Like when you say comparosaurus, just okay, be quiet. I'm not listening to you.
yeah. So you asked when kids start comparing,
When
and
do
I
they
think
start? Yeah.
it's often unfortunately when they have that teacher that wants everything in the right place. When they have, it's got to look nice. And here's another person in my life, my second grade teacher, Vicki Ahrens, who is also an arts and crafts camp counselor. I just remember her room was filled with arts and crafts, and not one thing looked alike. She didn't really use dittos or worksheets where everyone had the same thing. So it was all this, and everything was amazing and wonderful. So this teacher did the opposite of shutting down kids from judging. And what she would do, instead of saying, "What's that? What did you draw?" Because that's a kind of an intonation like, "I don't know what that is." It looks, kids will be like, "Ugh." She would say, "Tell me about your art, your picture,"
Yeah.
which opened things. So when you have those teachers, and I was a teacher, and I get it, like time constraint, and I want everything, and everyone's got to be the same pace, and not really being appreciative enough of kids that learn differently. Now that we're learning about all the neurospiciness and the different, like, we're constrained by a system where teachers think everyone you have to meet this mark. And that's when people start getting cutting off the playfulness and judging themselves, and not being willing to color outside the lines because society has said, this is what you look like. This is the way things need to go.
So I'm not sure that this is a conscious strategy that I'm using, but what it reminded me of, the way to not get in comparisonitis, is to really look for what I appreciate and what other people are doing, regardless of what other judgments might be cast on it. And so my daughter's a potter. She teaches pottery. And, when I when I go to some of her classes, I know for sure she takes pictures and says, this is the before someone's taken any classes. But I really like looking around and seeing what other things are doing and see what's great in that. And that's one of the ways that I keep out of comparing myself, right? So it can't
Yeah,
happen in all environments, but if I can appreciate differences in others and not comparing one to the other, but finding something good in all of them. Personally, I find it really healthy, and people seem to appreciate it as well, because
yeah.
oftentimes they don't see it themselves.
That's a mindset shift. That's
Mhm.
a mindset shift and a comfort shift. And I think the other challenge when we start to, judge ourselves and is social media. Because there's everyone sees there. And I just want to share, this is my one of my mantras, thanks to Gary Hirsch: play more, judge less. He drew this. If
Yep.
you're watching the video. And just trying to remind myself, look, I'm not perfect. I know when I'm judging. I caught myself. So I went to the Grateful Dead concert in San Francisco. There was the Grateful Dead 60-year anniversary. And there were some young people in front of me. They must have been in their early 20s. And they were, being there. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, "You don't know the Grateful Dead. You never heard Jerry, you know." And then behind me, I'm standing in front of the ADA, the accessible area, with the people who were like maybe 10 years older than me. And I'm doing this judging in my head, and then the voice came up, "Julie, you're judging because that was you 30 years ago, and these people could be saying the same thing about you." So in that moment, I had to do like your daughter, what else is out there, and appreciate that they're there enjoying the music and having the fun. And so, look, I'm not perfect. I know that I still judge. It is not healthy when I do it. And so I have to practice that muscle and strengthen that muscle again.
Well, and even that word perfect is interesting because, I could make a case that given your background, everything you've done, the way you're right now is perfect, given everything that's fed into it. You couldn't be any other way than you are. Doesn't mean you can't grow and things like that, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's right, given what you've gone through. And I think that's probably the case for all of us. I remember, because I know I met you through improv, and I know that's kind of a love and a joy of yours. And I was going to be co-facilitating with someone else I hadn't worked with before. We were going to do interactive keynotes. We
Mm,
were going to do it together, partner on stage. And we thought, you know what, since we haven't worked together, maybe we should just make sure there isn't this comparison. Let's take an improv class together. So we took a 2-weekend long improv course just to get over all that stuff where you're in that environment. Now we were 2, maybe 3 times older than the next oldest person in the group. But you can't enjoy that environment if you're comparing yourself to other people who maybe are faster, are smarter, think differently, all those kinds of things. And just that the whole value of being comfortable, just letting go, right? Like just sort of releasing. It's so freeing because we carry so much with us around that, protecting
yeah.
ourselves, and it burdens us down.
And how did the keynote go? How did playing
Well,
with
we
this
never ended
person,
up
was that
doing it.
helpful?
We had never ended up doing it, but we built a really great friendship out of that.
Right.
Right. So that
Right.
still like to do that sometime, but it was just being conscious of how like male, female, those differences, older, younger, all those differences, and how do you get them so they work with each other as opposed to compare one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. You gave me yet another data point of why everyone should take an improv class. I do I do a lot of mentoring with young women and older women and founders, and I will always say, take an improv class, come to a jam, I'll show up with you, and just watching the joy. Now, here's my so I use the principles of improv. I don't consider myself an improviser, although I've produced and directed an improv show called Whose Startup Is It Anyway? And there's my comfort line of getting on stage and performing. And I just do I want to do that? I prefer the games and the muscles and the therapy for it of it for me. One day maybe I'll do a theater sports
Yeah.
thing.
Well, and I I feel basically the same way. I don't think of myself as an improviser, but I value it as a mindset. I think it's fabulous for leadership development, for change management, for creativity, anything like that. But and you couldn't pay me enough to do stand-up comedy. You absolutely could not pay me enough. But what I like to do, I love being in person, but like far beyond, like I can do this stuff online, but rather be in person. And I think it's more about, I don't think of it performing what I'm doing on stage, but I'm just being my biggest, most authentic self possible. And I tell my clients in the engagement process, if you want something to be very anal and strict and stuff like that, not have a good time, you don't want me. Not because I can't do that, but I'm not going to be able to do my best for you if it's going to be constrained like that. So let's talk about that right up front. And I just remember that I'm not sure where we were in your journey. We last left you in Australia working for a very large company. And what's since then? Sorry, I
Yeah.
distracted myself.
No, that's good. What since then? So as I mentioned, I'm listening to the universe, meaning all those other stories, like things that came. The next one's going to land soon. I don't, and I'm getting anxious, waiting for it, or I don't know if because waiting sounds like I'm not being proactive. I'm
Mhm.
getting out there and things might form. So I am chief play officer of my agency, Playful Purpose, and I do facilitation. I just became a peer coaching guide. So
Okay.
working with other senior leaders and holding space for others, not giving advice, but creating a space where others can share. It's about storytelling.
Mhm.
It's not about, oh, have you tried this? Or why don't you do this? It's really a great training on making sure others are telling the story so people can take the nuggets. I've been watching curriculum being delivered and helping package that and looking for more. I'd love to get more paid speaking work,
Mhm.
and I am doing some work with founders in the startup ecosystem about storytelling using Story Spine. Thank you to my mentor Rebecca Stockley, who I actually met at Camp Apple. Talks about, does all the stuff with the Story Spine and how that can help when you're telling your startup story or your startup company, what it does, and getting used to that, to telling stories using that formula rather than having something memorized.
So I would like that job. I would like to be in your sandals, your thongs, your whatever. But
Flip flops.
Yeah, flip-flops. We'll go with flip-flops. So when you talked about facilitation, your company, say the name of your company again, please, Julie.
Playful purpose.
Playful purpose. So when you're facilitating, how do you tie that? Who do you facilitate for? Like yeah, how do you do that? How do you build it in? What are people looking for
Yeah,
when they hire you?
it's a really interesting question. So I recently had a facilitation with a bank. I did 3 workshops with a bank
Mhm.
that was going through a lot of change. The way I got that role is because I did my show, Who Started Visit Anyway, as part of a program at the end of a program, and it was hosted there. So they saw me, they saw what I
Mm,
did. And what this was whose startup is it anyway? It was at the end of this program. Instead of just having people get up on stage and sharing what they learned, they came up and shared some things, and then I had improvisers make into scenes and having fun with what they heard.
mm.
The old, Armando format. And this guy says, "Oh, you should come in and do that with one of our meetings. Come in and listen to a meeting and make up skits." And I said, "What I really do is this. I can help with teams. I help communication, bonding, being influential." And so that's how I got that role. I have worked with the startup ecosystem. So people who know me and seen me have brought me in to another organization where there was an accelerator, and I did a workshop on high performing teams because these are all startups that need help with how to talk to one another. And I did the yes, what I like about that. And 2 months later, one of the founders comes up to me and says, "Because of that, we are a happier, more productive company." I
Wow.
mean, yeah, wow is right. And it's
What's
just
that been
being
worth to
around.
you?
I mean,
No,
gold. I wish I.
no. What's it worth to them? Like,
Oh, was
that's
it?
what happened
Yeah,
6 months ago. So how much would you have
very
paid for me back then if you knew you were going to get this result?
right. And then through that, I got to go to another accelerator. So it's just having those conversations. It's not. So it's a little bit of a portfolio career. So everything from peer coaching, mentoring, facilitating. And I'm helping a friend of mine with a product she's building. So I know enough to be dangerous. I'm an expert generalist.
Well, more and more I'm hearing the value of that. So for so long as you have to be an expert in something, you have to be narrow and deep. And now I just don't think that that serves. You just lock yourself into something you can never get out of that way. So
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear you say that. So
Yeah.
so Julie, if you were to capture some of the principles of the path that you've followed, so someone else that's listening might think, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." Like, what would some characteristics be? 3 or 4 or 5 characteristics of the path that you've been on and
Mhm.
continue to be on.
Well, when I hear the word principle, I think of improv principles. And my favorite one is make others look smart and feel good.
Mhm.
That might fall under people pleaser, but the thing is, when you're helping others, like if everyone did that, what a wonderful world this would be like. And I think that's a way to show up. And I do try and do that. Not often with the expectation of someone reciprocating. Yes, it would be nice. So I'm also a very big relationship builder. So I call myself a human API, and I love so API is application protocol interface, but you called it all people interesting,
Mhm.
which I love. So I like to connect people and making sure that they're really valuable connections. Um, Being curious, that's another one of the things that it's really important. Yeah, I love that your reaction. So for those of you listening out there, David was like his face was like, "Yes, that's it."
It's exactly
um,
why we don't put this on video.
but being curious, reminding myself to continue to be curious and ask questions, and it's been really helpful. I'm out there. I was promoting a workshop that I'm bringing to Australia, and I sent it out to a whole bunch of improv schools. And I got an email back from some guy that I had actually spoken to before, and he's like, "This isn't for me. I've already been doing this for 30 years, but now calling it applied improv." And he kind of went on. It was very like internal egotistical, and I stopped, and I could have gotten very defensive, and I was like, "Huh." And I got curious and I said, "I'm curious, tell me more about why you're saying this and what you define as this, that, and the other thing." And he wrote back this is his background and where he was thinking and why he was doing what he was doing. And I replied back, I said, "Thank you for sharing that. I love," and I did like what I like about that. "I love that you're focusing locally. Here's my reason for sending this out. I'm looking for people to find joy in in facilitating and using and finding that delight." So I took it in, I yes-anded him. That wasn't his response wasn't about me, it was about him, and yeah, so being curious is really something that has been on my path, and trying things that hopefully those are the three. So making people look smart and feel good, being curious, yes, and play has really been, if I find old journals and whatnot, play has been a theme for a very long time.
Something else that you mentioned, not one of those big ones, but I think it weaves through it is joy, which is kind of like an outcome of being playful and things like that. And I remember many years ago there was a book out. I can't remember who published it. It's called The Joy of Conversation,
Mhm.
which how you get joy out of that. But it also occurred to me that, excuse me, thinking about the word enjoy. And often that's looked at as a judgment, like I enjoyed that movie, I enjoyed that person. And to me, I think it's more an action that you take. How do you enjoy something? How do you find joy or fabricate joy or feel joy from something? And it makes us much less a victim of our circumstances. It puts us in control of that.
Yeah, so it makes me think of that film gave me joy? Is that what you're saying? Like, I find joy in that versus enjoy?
Well, and so what did I enjoy about it? So I talked about appreciating, or it might have been, yeah, it was who I went with. The movie wasn't very good, but I enjoyed being out, or I enjoyed. So, but part of saying what I'm engaged in whatever's going on, as opposed to sitting back as an observer. Yes, I enjoyed that, or that's enjoyable, or things like that, as opposed to, I'm just thinking about this now. I'm enjoyable. I'm able to bring joy to what I do. It's kind of
I love that. Yeah,
just thinking about that out loud. But
yeah.
Julie, this has been great. I wish you're at several continents closer, but I appreciate you taking the time to be on this. I hope your workshop fills, and I hope that fellow that you talked to upon reflection and talking to some other people about this cheeky person, Julie Trell, about what they said, will actually sign up to have a bit of a transformative experience for him. So, Julie, thank you for being here. I'm David Gouthro here with Julie Trell today. Come on back next week for some more diverse perspectives. I don't know who it's going to be, but I know it's going to be someone different with different views of things. So thank you so much. Hope to have you listening next week. Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.